Hey guys, going on? It's me, Jay, here to talk a little bit about what is the biggest news in the world of professional wrestling right now that everybody is talking about, and that is Jade Cargill, former former TBS champion, making the jump from AEW to the WWE. And what do I think about this? Now, admittedly, I don't really watch AEW, so I don't know that much about Jade Cargill, but I do know something about her. I know that she was probably the most dominant female wrestler of 2002 as it pertains to AEW, and probably one of the biggest, uh, most dominant stars in AEW, of 2022, regardless, male or female. And I also know that she is a personal protege of Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes was the one who brung her in to AEW back 3 years ago, along with Shaquille O'Neal. She came in with a lot of fanfare. She came in with a lot of hype. And I also know that she is a monster of a woman. One of her influences growing up as a kid was China. You know what I mean? So she can be marketed more in WWE than she could in AEW. She doesn't really have the skills necessarily in the ring, wrestling wise, bell to bell, to compete with a lot of the AEW talent. To be honest, AEW doesn't really have a great women's division. Okay, they have Kira Hogan is there, Britt Baker is there, um, Thunder Rosa is there. But other than those, that handful, when people think about AEW and look to AEW, they don't really think about the female talent, in my opinion, other than the ones I just mentioned: Britt Baker, um, Thunder Rosa, and a few others. Mainly, it's the guides' talent. I mean, the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega, people like that. They tend to focus on MJF, Adam Cole, Samoa Joe, those kind of, the male talent. The female talent, people don't really focus on them. Now, her going to WWE, she'll have the chance to work with some of the top women in the business. And the match I'm looking forward to, the match that I say could be a main event for WrestleMania 40 in Philly. Um, you know, a, if not the main event for night one, maybe one of the top featured matches is her and Bianca Belair. We talked about how Bianca has gotten that mega push when they did the Endeavor thing. Who do they have there? Bianca and her husband, Montez Ford. So obviously they believe in Bianca, but here comes Jade Cargill, somebody that could match Bianca's energy, somebody that is very similar to the way Bianca is in the ring. She's like that. You know what I'm saying? They kind of will complement each other. That could be one of the great rivalries in professional wrestling in the future, going into 2023, 2024. And another benefit I believe her going to WWE will have is they have a training facility. She's raw. She's raw talent. You saw her winning streak in 2022, how she was just blowing through talent. She was like a Goldberg, but she didn't have the refinement. She didn't have the NXT system. So she'll go through the NXT system now, and she'll be able to hone her craft, and she'll be able to work on her promo skills. She already has the look, but she'll be able to refine that in-ring ability and the promo skills that will make her a superstar. I'm telling you, this is the best move that Jade Cargill could have did. Okay, but what does this mean for other people coming over um, from AEW to the WWE? So far, and remember we talked about it when AEW first opened up in 2019, there was a lot of people, like WWE experienced a mass exodus. You had Andrade that left. You had Keith Lee that left. You had Adam Cole that left. Well, he didn't leave in 2020, but he left a little while after. You had uh, Miro that left. CJ Perry, his wife Lana, she didn't leave right away, but she's there now. You had um, you had a bunch of Brian Danielson, CM Punk, all these guys. Well, CM Punk left in 2014, but he was on the backstage segment with Renee Young for Fox for a while as a Fox analyst, and he left and he went to AEW. Then you had John Moxley. He left when AEW first started. Basically, it was a one-way direction. People just leaving WWE, going to AEW. And then I said, who's going to be the first one to make that jump and be an AEW guy or girl and make that jump to WWE? And then in 2022, at WrestleMania 38, it happened. Cody Rhodes signed with WWE. Cody Rhodes, the founder, one of the godfathers of AEW, signed with WWE. And that one acquisition was better than any of the other acquisitions that AEW got from WWE. And now you have a homegrown talent. You have somebody that has never been to WWE, somebody that has never, ever wrestled in any other promotion besides AEW, jumping to the WWE now. And this is even worse. It's one thing when AEW gets guys and girls that WWE has already used up and has no use for, like a John Moxley, like Brian Danielson, like a CM Punk, like a Miro, like a Keith Lee, those kind of guys, right? That's one thing, because they're, as far as we're concerned, in the WWE in New York, here, Jacksonville can have them because we in New York, we're done with them. Let Jacksonville have them. They could take the train down to Jacksonville. But when we start bringing up talent from Jacksonville to New York and we start remaking talent, then you see history start to repeat itself. And what do I mean by that? Back in the day, back in the 90s, WWE was known as the place if you wanted to be a star and you weren't already an established talent and you wanted to make something of yourself and move up the ladder of success past these veterans, past these ex-WWE guys. The place to do it was WWE, because the only thing WCW would do is take you after you were an already established star. WCW took Hulk Hogan, they took Scott Hall, they took Kevin Nash, they took the Big Boss Man, Rick Rude, Kurt Hennig, all these guys that Vince McMahon had built up, or at least made them bigger stars. It can be argued that they were stars already in their respective territories, especially Kurt Hennig, Hulk Hogan, and even Scott Hall to some degree. But Vince made them bigger stars. Vince made them the stars they were. And then WCW came knocking later, and they got up there and they got some big guaranteed contracts. And it became another place for them to wrestle when WWE was either no longer interested in them at all or interested in paying the kinds of contracts and giving them the kinds of pushes that they thought they deserved. But for guys that were traditional WCW guys, homegrown talents, other than Sting, they often got neglected and they often got pushed to the side. An example of this is The Big Show. The Big Show was a guy who was a WCW talent. He was discovered by Hulk Hogan in 1995, and he was brought into the company and gave a major push. But by the time the NWO got started and more WWF guys started to make that jump, he was pushed to the background. So he said, if I want to be a star and make it really big in the industry, I got to switch companies. And that's when he came over to the WWE in 1999. But same thing with Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho, he was doing big things in WCW, trying to set it up for a match with Goldberg. But that didn't happen because they didn't consider him enough of a star. So he wanted to make a name for himself. So he switched brands in 1999. The Radicals, the same thing. Look, the Radicals, they were the workhorses of WCW. They were the guys that were having the great matches in WCW. but they couldn't catch a break necessarily, so they had to switch brands in 2000. Same thing was with TNA. TNA became a place for WWE rejects in the 2000s and 2010s. Guys that WWE weren't interested in anymore. Kurt Angle, for example, left the company after he was dealing with his drug addiction, and he went down to TNA. Christian Cage went down to TNA. Booker T went down to TNA. Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, the Nasty Boys, um, Hulk Hogan, and Eric Bischoff, even after they were done with their WWE tenure. And it just became a place for older wrestlers, guys that were no longer in the limelight in WWE would go down to TNA or TNA in the 2000s and 2010s, and WCW in the 1990s. But neither company was ever a place for somebody new to become an established star. It was for somebody old to continue wrestling, but somebody knew that to become an established star, people knew that you had to come to New York. You know what I mean? You had to go to the WWE because you know where you were, the older talent was going to be in your way, and it seems like AEW is similar to that. It seems like AEW rather roll out the red carpet for the ex WWE guys like Brian Danielson, CM Punk, uh, Chris Jericho, even Paul White, the Big Show. Um, then focus on their homegrown talent. So here you have Jade Cargill, a homegrown talent, the first ever homegrown talent to leave AEW. That's crazy, man. I mean, we don't. Those that don't learn from history are doomed to repeat, and it seems like in this context, AEW is repeating the same mistakes like TNA and WCW. Because TNA back in the 2000s and 2010s, they had so many good talent, so many homegrown talent. The Samoa Joes, the AJ Styleses, the Low Keys, the Christopher Danielses, all those guys that they didn't push, but they rather push. As soon as a WWE guy makes that jump, boom, they roll out the red carpet for him. They drop their pants for him, and they're willing to do whatever it takes for that person to be happy. We saw it all throughout TNA's history. WCW was similar. You know what I mean? The NWA Jim Crockett, that was a little bit different because um, guys really didn't, you know, guys from WWE didn't really make the jump at all, really, other than Ricky Steamboat to Jim Crockett Promotions. And Ricky Steamboat was already a talent uh, in, uh, in Jim Crockett Promotions before it was called Jim Crockett Promotions. He was a talent when it was called Mid Atlantic Championship Wrestling in the 70s. You know what I mean? So uh, guys didn't really move back and forth necessarily in the 80s. You know what I mean? But in the 90s, that's how it was. If you were an older established talent and WWE wasn't interested in, or WWF at that time wasn't interested in you, you would go to the WCW in the 2000s and 2010s. If you were that and WWE wasn't interested in you, you would go to TNA and they would roll out the red carpet for you and put you above their established talent to the neglect of their established talent. Think about it. Chris Jericho, the whole trajectory of Chris Jericho's career. At one point, he was a young, hungry Lionheart when he first came to WCW in 1996, and he was pushed aside for the young veterans. Then when he goes to AEW in 2019, he's the one who's the older veteran, and he's pushing aside a lot of these young lions. Anyway, guys, that's all I wanted to say about Jade Cargill. I hope she does well in WWE. Like I said, the match I want to see is her versus Bianca Belair. They could also have her versus Nia Jax now that Nia Jax is back in the company. Um, uh, Becky Lynch is another person I'd like to see a match with her with. Anyway, guys, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to see when my next video is coming out. Love y'all.